Are you ready to witness the moment when a group of ruthless bikers learned the hard way not to mess with a former military K9 handler and her fiercely loyal dogs from a blazing desert highway standoff to the depths of an abandoned mine filled with peril? This story will have you on the edge of your seat. Veronica Pierce, a seasoned driver on a humanitarian mission, found her path blocked by a brutal gang, only to prove that her two German shepherds, Orion and Titan, were more than enough to turn the tables in the heart of this high-speed chase and explosive showdown. You'll discover the courage, strategy, and unbreakable bond between handler and dogs. Will they manage to deliver life-saving supplies and outmaneuver criminals who stop at nothing? Stick around to find out the thrilling outcome. And while you're here, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Your support fuels our ability to bring you incredible stories. Like this one. Trust us, you won't want to miss what happens next. Call off your dogs, lady, or we'll put you down first. Those were the last words Viper Jacob spat before he realized threatening a former military working dog handler was the gravest error of his criminal career. The searing Arizona heat shimmered off the asphalt that morning as Veronica Pierce guided her 18-wheeler out of a supply depot just outside Phoenix. The trailer behind her was loaded with crucial medical supplies, bound for gravely ill children, a cargo that could not afford. Delays. This was normally a straightforward run. A long haul over interstate highways she had navigated countless times. But on this day, the Desert Reapers motorcycle gang decided to make her truck their target. If the Desert Reapers had done even a shred of research, they would have learned something that might have saved them a world of trouble. Orion and Titan, the pair of German shepherds seated calmly in Veronica's cab, were not mere pets. Both dogs were decorated combat veterans, having completed over 200 successful missions under the U.S. military. In the service, Veronica had been their handler, forging an unbreakable bond tempered by the fires of active war zones. The Desert Reapers, however, had no inkling of who they had just cornered. The day's events began under a sun so hot it felt like it could melt. Rubber. Veronica's truck rumbled out onto the open road. Before dawn had fully broken her mind, already focused on the children awaiting vital medication in Houston. Sophia Ramirez, a fellow truck who had befriended Veronica during their many shared journeys, had warned her via CB radio that Desert Reapers were prowling certain stretches of the highway. Sophia's quick message crackled through the static heads, up southbound I-40. Reapers spotted near the Iron Ridge truck stop. They're shaking down drivers again. Veronica felt her jaw tighten. The Desert Reapers had grown from a rowdy motorcycle club into a far more menacing entity in the last few years, rumored to be dabbling in weapons trafficking and intimidation of long-haul truckers. Even so, she gave a brisk reply she had half a tank of diesel, and her rig could hold out until she reached safer territory. She had no desire to engage with criminals. The open highway, though, isn't always as free as it looks. And trouble can lurk behind the next curve, sure enough, as the sun inched higher. Veronica's cautious glances in her side mirror. Roars revealed a pack of bikes picking up speed, merging onto the highway behind her. "Just keep your head pierced," she told. The only advantage was that her truck modifications holdovers from her days hauling in war zones included bullet-resistant glass and reinforced panels. More important than hardware, though, were her two formidable companions. Orion, large and keen, sat poised near her right shoulder, while Titan, slightly leaner but with a sharper, more analytical gaze, surveyed the rear from the passenger seat. They sensed Veronica's shift in demeanor the moment she spotted the bikes, and as if on cue, Titan uttered a low rumble quiet enough that any untrained ear might miss it. But Veronica knew better. Her dogs were on alert, reading her posture. her scent, and the tension crackling in the air. The Desert Reapers kept formation 5 or 6, abreast, black leather and glinting chrome in the morning sun. Their front man wearing a vest with the club's emblem, a stylized scorpion's tail. Veronica understood exactly what an ambush looked like she had orchestrated and survived. Plenty of them in combat. This was about to get serious, and swiftly, the shrill static of the CB radio jerked Veronica's attention for a moment. Sophia's voice more. Reapers up ahead, near mile marker 147. Watch yourself. They're boxing trucks in the image of a group of outlaw bikers attempting to hem her rig in an inescapable ring, triggered memories of remote Afghan roads where insurgents perfected the art of corral, and convoys, back then, Orion and Titan had proven indispensable. The dogs could hear an engine approach from impossibly far away, sniff out explosives, and detect even the slightest variations in human breathing that indicated aggression 104. Sophia Veronica responded with forced calm. She braced her arms on the wheel, scanning the highway. It was the same posture she'd used in her last overseas deployment, anticipating threats from any angle. No official escort, no local cops. In night, the hour was still early, and the desert roads were long and quiet. Up ahead, the sun was rising in a blaze, casting elongated shadows of cacti and distant hills. Veronica's gut told her that if the Desert Reapers were determined, they'd find a way to force her over her half-tank of fuel might not be enough to push onward indefinitely, and even if it were surrendering, the cargo was unthinkable. A child in need of a specialized treatment wasn't going to care about the biker gang's bravado or the reasons behind a delayed shipment. Time was the only factor that mattered. She wasn't the only one on edge. Titan, typically the calmer dog, began shifting his weight, scanning the side windows with vigilant eyes. Orion, the older of the two, gave a low whine that most people might interpret as mild agitation. But Veronica understood, as readiness, these dogs had done everything from patrolling barbed wire perimeters to clearing entire compounds in the dead of night. She and her K9 partners had once faced a frantic firefight with insurgents pinned down behind an overturned vehicle, and Orion had leapt over the barrier, charging the threat without a moment's hesitation. If the Desert Reapers intended harm, they were in for a harsh lesson ahead. The black silhouettes of more bikes came into focus, another half-dozen. At least some parted formation to let a heavier custom-painted chopper take lead, the rider's vest, B insignia that matched the hissing scorpion emblem. But the name stitched above it read, Blade Mitchell Jacobs, in the truck's mirrors. Veronica saw the trailing bikes had also begun to close in. They were positioned to form a pincer movement, something she'd only seen well-organized outfits attempt. Sophia. Veronica barked into the radio. Any word from law enforcement. All she got in return was static, and then a couple of garbled phrases that sounded like a policeman requesting backup. Possibly, there was an Arizona Highway Patrol unit somewhere out there, trying to respond. But as of now, no sirens, no lights, nothing. The Reaper's front rider peeled off, drifting closer to Veronica's window. She could see the malicious gleam in his eyes as he yelled over the roar of engines and wind, demanding that she pull over. She kept her gaze fixed forward. She'd learned from experience that showing any sign of acquiescence or fear only emboldened aggressors. Her plan: keep the truck moving at a steady clip, watch for an opening, and rely on her dogs and training if it came down to a confrontation. Hey lady, you hear me? Pull over, or I'll put a bullet in those fancy windows. The writer's words were lost to the wind, but Veronica made out enough. She offered the same stoic reaction she'd practiced countless times in the military. Eyes forward, full situational awareness, zero intimidation. Her mind churned through tactical options. She could accelerate, but that might provoke a chase and risk ramming or forced collision. She could slow down, but that guaranteed being trapped, sensing her indecision. Titan let out a more assertive bark, as if to say, "We're here. We've got you." Orion followed suit, creeping to the edge of the passenger seat to fix a glare at the biker trying to get close. Veronica spoke quietly to her dogs. "Easy, boys, not yet." She reached one hand down to a discreet panel beneath her seat, verifying that it was still armed years ago. Working in high-threat environments overseas, she'd learned to equip her rigs with non-lethal deterrents. Powerful flashers, smoke canisters, even ballistic glass. She never expected to need them. Stat side, but old habits die hard. The earpiece squawked again, but this time it was an unfamiliar voice. "This is Sergeant Delgado, Arizona Highway Patrol. We've received a call about possible biker harassment on I-40. Anyone out there?" "Copy." Hope flickered in Veronica's chest. She keyed her mic. "Sergeant Delgado, this is Truck 29 driver, Veronica Pierce, heading eastbound. I've got at least 10, maybe more. Reapers trying to corral me. Cargo is medical supplies. Destination, Houston Children's Hospital." Static crackled, followed by Delgado's tense reply. "Acknowledge, Miss Pierce. We're dispatching units, but the nearest patrol is 15 minutes out. Hang tight. 15 minutes might as well have been a year in a situation like this." Looking in the mirror, she saw the trailing formation fan out, engines revving as if they were gearing up for an assault. The one nearest to her cab revved again, edging dangerously close, and smacked something heavy against her driver's side door. Metal on metal. The clang reverberated through the reinforced door. Orion erupted in a guttural snarl that was fierce enough to send a normal man stumbling back, but the biker kept pace unaffected. Veronica risked a quick glance to her side mirror, and what she saw made her stomach tighten further. The second wave was behind her, brandishing a set of crowbars or heavy chains. These guys looked more prepared than typical petty criminals. The possibility that this was more than just a random hijacking began to crystallize in her mind. Her trailer was full of high-value medication. Could they be specifically targeting it? "Sergeant Delgado," she said into the mic, "I think they know what I'm hauling. They're not just messing around. They want this cargo." His response was drowned out by the roar of engines as the Reapers tightened their encirclement. Veronica's heart pounded, but her gaze remained steady in the passenger seat. Titan and Orion sensed it was almost go time. They stood, hackles raised, eyes locked on the threat, in a moment that felt both surreal and all too familiar. Veronica recalled the last major mission she and her dogs had conducted in Kandahar. Their convoy had come under ambush from multiple angles, and through some combination of skill discipline and a pinch of raw luck, she and her K9s turned what could have been a slaughter into a successful extraction here on an American highway. The similarities were jarring. A well-coordinated group of aggressors, a cargo that could be life or death in a ticking clock. Her left hand flicked a hidden switch in the rig's side compartments, clicked open, revealing tinted windows behind ballistic glass. At the same time, she tapped a discreet button on the steering wheel. The truck's custom modifications were about to earn their keep. An array of high-intensity lights mounted on her trailer began to flash intermittently, a trick designed to disorient pursuers at night. It wasn't as effective in daylight, but it might still rattle them. Sure enough, a few of the bikers behind her swerved slightly, momentarily confused by the unexpected strobe Viper Jacobs. However, the man she now recognized as the Desert Reaper top leader did not flinch his patch. Red President. And from the furious set of his jaw, Veronica sensed he wasn't used to being denied. He sped up, bringing his bike parallel to her driver's side door through the glass. She could see the malice twisting his features. He shouted something, pointing a finger at Orion, who stared back, muzzle pulled back in a silent snarl. Then she saw him produce a shotgun from a scabbard strapped to his bike. Time slowed. Veronica's soldier instinct surged. Her eyes darted to the road ahead. No immediate obstacle, then to the side open desert behind flashing lights of motorcycles. She forced the truck to stay its course, resisting the urge to swerve away. Surrendering the lane, or panicking, would give them what they wanted, a precarious opening. Viper Jacobs aimed at the side of the trailer, and in an instant the blast echoed across the asphalt. Pellets ricocheted off reinforced plating, leaving only superficial marks. The next shot, she knew, would be aimed higher at the cab. Veronica jerked the wheel left to spoil his aim, and the muzzle flare blossomed just as she had hoped. Wide of the target, all right enough, Veronica muttered to herself. She pressed another button on the center console. A dense plume of smoke gushed out from canisters positioned along the underside of her trailer, legal to own but adapted from a design she'd seen used in convoys overseas. White clouds billowed across both lanes, enveloping the nearest bikers in swirling fog. Though the smoke proved a temporary shield, it wouldn't last. The Reapers would regroup, and she needed a real plan of escape. And if they truly wanted her cargo, they wouldn't give up with a little smoke. She took a calming breath, focusing on her next move, glancing at Orion and Titan. Titan, Veronica spoke calmly. We've been through worse time to remind these jokers who they're dealing with. The dogs locked eyes with her, as though fully understanding. The vow. The smoke began to clear, revealing a new, unsettling reality. The Reapers weren't. Deterred, they had fanned out some riding well beyond the cloud, anticipating her moves. Viper Jacobs was in full command, bellowing orders that carried above the roaring engine's sins. Meanwhile, Blade Mitchell Jacobs, his second in command, circled around to block the forward lane. Veronica felt the truck rumble beneath her as she tried to accelerate. The Reapers ahead formed a blockade. Motorcycles staggered in a line, all with engines revving, waiting for her to come within range from behind. Additional riders closed in, no longer messing about. She could see at least one of them brandishing an assault rifle. Another crackle came over the CB truck 29. This is Delgado. Got your location pinned. Sending units. ETA 10 minutes. 10 minutes. Veronica clenched her teeth. That was still an eternity in a standoff. This volatile, she noticed something else. The nearest bikers seemed oddly synchronized, using signals more akin to military hand gestures than the typical gang signs. The possibility that some of these men had paramilitary training crossed her mind that might explain their courage in the face of a rig built like a fortress. And if that were true, they might also know something about K9 tactics, how to neutralize or circumvent them. This isn't just a random hijacking, Veronica muttered. She touched a small duffel behind the driver's seat. Inside were specialized vests for Orion and Titan, each with compartments for attachments like cameras, hearing protection, and more advanced gear. She'd maintained them meticulously, even though her official service days were over. Now, she was grateful for her foresight while guiding the truck slowly forward. Veronica unzipped the bag, pulling out the tactical vests. Orion Titan dressed the dogs, recognized the cue. Titan hopped into the back area of the cab where Veronica kept extra space for them in fluid motions. They allowed Veronica to strap on the gear, each step practiced so many times that neither dog showed any anxiety, only readiness. Meanwhile, outside the Reaper's blockade loomed. Viper Jacobs revved his bike in challenge, clearly prepared to unleash another shotgun blast if Veronica attempted to ram through 2 or 3 riders, were flanking his position, and behind her at least 5 more, possibly others lurking in the smoky fringes. She needed to do something that capitalized. Surprise her training from Kandahar came rushing back. Create confusion, break the enemy's formation, and exploit the gap. Reaching into the center console, she pulled out a small remote linked to additional countermeasures. She had one more trick: high-intensity flashers angled at chest level meant to blind or disorient. Without warning, Veronica unleashed the flashers. Bright pulses of white and red light burst from hidden panels aimed outward at the ring of motorcycle cycles. The effect was immediate. The riders nearest her shielded their eyes or instinctively slowed. Viper Jacobs's curses could be heard even through the wind. In that split second, Veronica wrenched the wheel, steering the truck toward a slight gap in the blockade. The rig's engine roared in protest, tires screeching against the asphalt as she aimed the truck at the narrowest portion of open road. Orion and Titan braced themselves. Whether the Reapers expected it or not, Veronica was about to punch through metal clashed with metal as the front fender of Veronica's truck side-swiped one of the bikes. The Reaper Arid leapt off, just in time, rolling into the dirt shoulder as his vehicle skittered across the pavement. She heard curses, shouts, the roar of engines revving, but the main goal was accomplished. A hole opened in the blockade. She slammed down the accelerator. The rig bucked forward, even reinforced with ballistic panels. An 18-wheeler wasn't built for off-road stunts, but desperation often led to unorthodox maneuvers. Despite her truck's heavy load of medical supplies, Veronica managed to punch through the Reaper's partial line. Bursting onto an adjacent frontage road from there, she spotted a sign indicating a service station a mile further up. She also noticed the bikers behind her recovering from the initial shock, and giving chase if she could reach some form of more populated area. It might dissuade them from taking extreme measures. But that was a big if. Especially if they had no qualms about open violence. Viper Jacobs was back on her driver's side, though slightly behind. She caught a glimpse of him reloading his shotgun. She flicked on the strobe again, just enough to break his line of sight. The follow-up shot went wide, scattering pellets across the highway. A voice cut in on the CB, this time slightly clearer. "Miss Pierce Delgado here. Where are you now?" She quickly rattled off her approximate mile mark. "I'm diverting to a frontage road near mile 145. They're still on me. I'm trying to reach safe ground." "Understood," Delgado replied. "Local law enforcement is advising you head to Warren's truck, Haven at mile 146. The owner, Dave Warren, is ex-military. He can help secure the area until we arrive." Warren's truck. Haven. Veronica had stopped there once or twice. Dave Warren had a reputation for being sympathetic to drivers hauling sensitive cargo. She angled her rig toward the next exit, the rumble strips vibrating beneath the wheels as she maneuvered onto a narrower road. She cast a glance to the back seats. Orion and Titan remained calm vests on each dog's gaze, scanning the situation with disciplined intensity. Titan's ears were pricked forward while Orion was sniffing at the window. Gap presumably tracking the Reaper's chemical-laden exhaust, or the tang of gunpowder relief. However cautious began to seep into Veronica's mind, just another mile to the truck. Haven, she prayed it wouldn't be swarming with more Reapers. But given how orchestrated the attack felt, nothing could be taken for granted. She caught the next sign, Warren's truck. Haven 1/2 mile, flicking her signal, more out of habit than necessity. She guided the battered rig off the frontage road, the Desert Reapers still close. Behind the rising dust revealed no immediate backup for them, though she had to trust Delgado and Dave Warren to pull through Warren's truck. Haven sat on a sprawl, falling piece of land, its main structure resembling a hybrid of a diner in a supply depot with a wide parking lot for rigs. Of every size, a tall security fence encircled part of the compound. A leftover from Dave Warren's days of meticulous ex-military standards as Veronica rumbled in. She noticed a solitary figure standing guard with binoculars. Likely Dave himself, no sooner had she slowed her truck than the Desert Reaper surged in from behind, engines echoing menacingly across Ross. The lot, a couple of them skidded sideways, forming a rough semicircle near the entrance as if to block an escape. They might not have had the advantage of stealth, but their numbers remained imposing. Veronica eased her truck into a space near the fence, leaving enough room for maneuver. She killed the engine, but kept all her internal systems on, ready to power up countermeasures if needed. Reaching over, she flipped open a side compartment in the cab, her old service pistol stowed in a locked safe. In many runs, she never had cause to use it tonight. It seemed wise to be prepared for anything. Orion and Titan sat at attention, peering through the windshield. Their posture was not that of pets, but of alert, confident protectors awaiting direction. Veronica gave them a small hand signal to stay put, stepping down from the cab to meet Dave Warren. He walked toward her, a tall man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair, a commanding presence even in civilian clothes. "Miss Pierce," he asked gruffly, though not unkindly, "Veronica, thanks for the assist." She swept a hand toward the descending swarm of bikers. Local law enforcement said, "I might find safe ground here." Warren let out a low chuckle, though his eyes never left the approaching Reapers. "Safe enough. Long as we keep them outside that fence, my wife Carla is inside coordinating cameras. We've got a few vantage points they don't know about before." Either could say more. Viper, killed his engine in a dramatic flourish, stepping off his bike with the shotgun still in hand. Blade Mitchell Jacobs and a few others followed suit. They looked around, taking in the security fence, the cameras perched at the corners, and Dave Warren's calm stance. "You think we care about some fence?" Viper snarled. "Hand over the cargo, or we'll torch this place and everything in it." Veronica felt her blood turn cold. She spotted Dave Warren's jaw. Titan, he clearly wasn't one to take threats slightly. The ex-soldier gave a curt nod to Carla, who was hovering at the door. She disappeared inside, likely to monitor the cameras or call the authorities with an update. The standoff fell into a tense silence. Veronica stood at the base of her trucks, steps, arms folded, as Orion and Titan watch from behind the windshield. If the Rapers tried anything, the dogs would be on them in seconds. But a random bloodbath wasn't the goal she still hoped. This could be resolved with minimal violence, especially with the police. "Close your move," Dave Warren said, voice low, as he hefted a battered baseball bat from behind his back. Despite his age, he exuded a readiness, shoulders set, eyes unwavering. "This property is private, and we don't take kindly to threats here, Blade Mitchell." Jacobs scoffed. "We're not scared of a couple of old war relics." He jerked his chin at Veronica's truck. "Or those pooches. Don't matter how tough they are. We'll put him down in that instant." Orion let out a singular thunderous bark, one that carried the weight of every combat operation he and Titan had been through. Even from inside the truck, the intimidation factor was undeniable. A flicker of caution crossed Blade Mitchell's eyes. Just then, static sputtered on Veronica's handheld radio, loud enough for the Reapers to catch Pierce Delgado. "Here, we're a few minutes out. We've got eyes on a large group of bikers at the truck." "Haven, is that you?" she answered without taking her eyes off the Reapers. "Yes, Sergeant. They're all here. Not backing down." Delgado's response crackled with urgency. "Sit tight. Backup is inbound." "Viper." Jacob shifted his stance, gripping the shotgun with both hands. "You hear that cops will be here soon. But guess what? Lady, doesn't matter. We know what's in that trailer. We're taking those medical supplies, and if we have to make an example, we will. Veronica's fists clenched. She'd faced down threats in foreign war zones, but hearing an American criminal so casually threaten children's medical supplies churned her gut. The cargo included specialized treatments that some kids couldn't go another day without. What kind of depravity is this? She stepped forward. Why do you care so much about medicine for terminally ill children? Some of these supplies are worthless on the street. They're not narcotics. The corners of Viper's mouth turned up in a twisted grin. It's bigger than you think. Certain chemicals, certain compounds can be repurposed. We've got buyers who paid top dollar, and if that means a few sick kids don't get their meds? He shrugged, the implication hanging in the air. Dave Warren spat in the dust. You'll have to come through me and her if you want it. The moment teetered on a knife's edge. The Reapers outnumbered them, but they were on private, well-monitored property. More than that, Monica's dogs were trained to act on a dime. She had her pistol holstered under her jacket. Dave likely had more than a bat, and Delgado was on the way, though no one knew precisely how long that would take. Viper glanced around. Calculation, evident in his eyes, he might have recognized that a full-scale shootout wasn't in his best interest, especially with the day's light revealing them in front of cameras, but backing down wasn't in his vocabulary either. After a tense beat, he growled, "Fine, we'll be back for that cargo." He jerked his head at Blade Mitchell. "Let's go, but keep men posted nearby. We'll see how tough you are once in the sun." Sets with that, he and the Rapers returned to their bikes, engines revving and peeled out, leaving tire marks in their wake watching them. Fade into the highway's haze didn't ease Veronica's tension. She knew they'd return with a bigger, meaner plan. The roar of departing motorcycles echoed across the truck, Haven's lot, and Dave Warren exhaled slowly. That could have gone worse, he mused. He patted the bat against his palm, then nodded at Veronica inside. "Let's get you sorted before they come back." Sensing a lull, Veronica whistled twice, the signal for Orion and Titan to stand down from inside the cab. Both German shepherds did a quick, curious glance around before returning to a less intense posture. She felt the adrenaline still surging through her system, but forced herself to exhale and focus on the next steps inside Warren truck. Haven, the decor mixed, Americana trucker culture with subtle hints of Dave's military past. Flags, old black and white photos, and a small trophy case with medals. Carla War was at a control panel. Linked to half a dozen security monitors, she nodded at Veronica, then flicked to a channel showing the Reapers regrouping about a mile down the road. "Yep, they've parked in a dirt lot by the rest stop sign," Carla said. No sign of immediate movement, but they won't sit idle for long. Veronica nodded. "Thanks for letting me park my rig here. Delgado's on his way, but I'm sure they'll regroup for a second assault if they think they can get those supplies." Dave exchanged a grim look with Carla. "We've seen the Reapers throw their weight around, but not like this. They're turning more violent, clipping Orion's leash to guide him inside. Veronica, let Titan follow obediently. We have to figure out if they're after random cargo or if they knew exactly what was in my trailer," she said. "Viper Jacobs hinted that they knew the specifics, which concerns me more than any random hijacking." At that, Carla angled her head toward Dave. "Maybe you should call Delgado directly. Let him know what you suspect in moments." They had the radio patched through. Sergeant Delgado's voice answered Miss Pierce. "Mr. Warren, we're 5 miles out." "Good to hear. You held them off." Veronica took a breath. "Sergeant, I have reason to believe this wasn't random. They know the trailer holds specialized medications for Houston Children's Hospital, Some components can be misused or sold to certain illicit markets. An audible sigh on the other end, that's consistent with recent intel. We've had hijackings of similar shipments in the past month. The Desert Reapers used to be small time, but they're more organized now. Possibly a bigger network is behind them. Dave made eye contact with Veronica. She saw in his eyes the same look of foreboding. She had this ran deeper than local thugs. "We'll hold position here. You can secure the cargo once you arrive," Dave said. "But I have a feeling the Reapers won't stay away. They'll likely want to retake the initiative." Veronica gazed at Orion and Titan, each dog panting quietly poised for the next step. She murmured, "We'll be ready." 10 minutes later, true to his word, Sergeant Delgado arrived at Warren's truck, Haven with 2 squad cars. The swirl of red and blue lights announced their presence. Delgado, tall, lanky, with the worn expression of someone who'd seen too many borderline war zones in his own state, stepped out and surveyed the area. The battered patch on Veronica's truck and the scuff marks along the side from shotgun pellets told half the story. The tension in everyone's posture told the rest. Delgado approached with a handshake offered to Dave Warren, then turned to Veronica. "I see your dogs are as disciplined as I've heard," he said, nodding at Orion and Titan, who stayed close at Veronica's side. Veronica gave a curt nod. "They've saved my life more than once." She'd swapped out Titan's and Orion's leashes for harness attachments that gave them freer movement, if needed. Dave quickly briefed Delgado on the standoff that had just occurred. Carla adding details on the security footage. Delgado's brow furrowed. "This lines up with broader intel. The Desert Reapers have stepped up their game. More weapons, more tactical knowledge, and clearly more interest in certain specialized cargo. We suspect someone's funneling them money and instructions. Any he leads on." "Who that might be?" Veronica asked, crossing her arms. She had the stance of a soldier asking a superior officer for details, a habit she'd never quite shaken. Delgado sighed fragmentary intelligence. "We have a few names possible. Ex-military types turned rogue. One in particular goes by Ravenhawk. Hard to confirm, but it's clear the Reaper aren't just in this for random hijacks anymore." Sofia Ramirez's voice crackled in over the CB, surprising everyone. "Veronica, that you? I saw a commotion from the highway, heard about trouble near Warren." "You? Okay." Veronica immediately grabbed the mic. "Sofia, we're fine for now. Reapers are still in the area. Where are you? About 3 miles up," came Sofia's reply. "I'm pulling over at the next rest area. If I can help, let me know." Veronica exchanged a glance with Elgato. "We might need backup if the Reapers come back in force. Sofia is a friend and a skilled driver. She also has connections in the trucker community." Delgado nodded, then turned to Dave. "For now, let's move M. Pierce's rig to a secure portion of your lot. We'll keep a unit here with you while I coordinate with State Patrol about escort options before they could finalize the plan." Carla interrupted, "Heads up. Cameras, show some movement down the road." "Reaper, regrouping, looks like they're making calls." A ripple of apprehension moved through the group. If the Reapers were calling in more of their members, or worse, contacting outside mercenaries, this could escalate quickly. Veronica could almost see the clock ticking in her mind, counting down the time until those children in Houston needed their medications. She bent to give Orion and Titan a quick check. "You two ready for another?" "Tango." Titan's ears perked. Orion's tail thumped once on the floor. Veronica suppressed a wry grin. Her dogs were always ready. Delgado motioned for them to follow him to the back office. "Let's strategize if Ravenhawk or some bigger fish is behind them. We have to anticipate paramilitary tactics. Miss Pierce, your background could help us." "Dave, you too. Thus began the ad hoc war council with Carla monitoring security feeds, Dave and Delgado consulting maps of the region, and Veronica offering insights from her combat experience. All the while, Orion and Titan lay at her feet, panting softly, their eyes half-lighted yet alert. Inside Warren's cramped office, the tension felt almost tangible. The overhead fluorescent flickered occasionally, highlighting the faint stress lines on each face. Veronica Delgado. Dave and Carla, a whiteboard on one side, was rapidly filling with scrolled notes and possible routes to evade or confront the Reapers. "Here's the thing," Delgado said, tapping a marker against the board. "We have official channels, but if the Reapers are being backed by someone with resources, they'll know how to avoid or gain typical police tactics." Veronica's gaze fell to the topographical map Dave unfurled on the desk back in Kandahar. "We'd sometimes slip out using older roads, not on any main map. We can do something similar here if we can confirm those roads can handle an 18-wheeler. Dave nodded thoughtfully, pointing to a faint line on the map. "There's an old mining route that bypasses the main interstate. I used it once, back in my day, hauling surplus. It's rough, but with the right driving it might work." Carla, clicking through camera angles, chimed in, "And it would throw off anyone expecting you to take the straightforward path. But we have to consider that the Reapers have lookouts at major junctions. They're not amateurs now, so we go at night." Veronica suggested the Reapers might expect it, but Orion and Titan work exceptionally well in darkness. We'd stand a better chance if we control the timing and place of confrontation. Delgado made a wry face. "That's a gamble, but we're short on options if we want to beat the clock for those children's medications," over the hum of the desk fan. Veronica could practically hear her own heartbeat. She leaned down to scratch Orion behind the ears, an old habit from when they took 5-minute breathers between missions. Titan stood in stretch, giving a silent yawn. Both dogs seemed calm amidst the tension, used to stressful briefings from their military days. A knock on the open doorway drew their attention. Sofia Ramirez stepped in, her curly black hair still pressed from wearing a ball cap, for hours on the road, gaze shifting from person to person. "I took the back route," she said softly, "to avoid the Reapers. They're definitely calling in more guys. Saw about a dozen new bikes near the broken diner off I-40. Carla's eyes flicked to the screens. "Could confirm that we have a partial vantage from the highway camera. They're doubling in numbers." Sophia set her phone on the table, and one more thing, some chatter on the CB band about a certain Raven Hawk. Or Hawk, heard a biker say. "He'll be here soon." Sounds like they're waiting on a real big shot at the mention of Raven Delgado. Stiffen. That's worse news than we hoped? We suspected someone with ex-military ties was orchestrating these hijackings. If it's Ravenhawk, we're dealing with a guy who knows how to coordinate large-scale paramilitary ops. Veronica closed her eyes for a moment, centering her thoughts. She knew the name from after-action reports. Ravenhawk had been a rumored figure, discharged under scandalous circumstances involving illicit dog training and stolen gear. If he was now hooking up with the Desert Reapers, the threat level just skyrocketed. The plan came together in disjointed segments reflecting the urgency of the situation. Under normal circumstances, Veronica would wait for a fully escorted police convoy. But Delgado's limited manpower and the Reapers' sprawling presence made that impractical. Meanwhile, children in Houston needed those deliveries, so the group settled on a strategy. Veronica would drive out after nightfall, veering onto the old mining route Dave had highlighted with darkness as her ally and Orion and Titans as nocturnal training. She might just slip through. Meanwhile, Sophia would stage a decoy on the main highway, an empty trailer with dummy cargo broadcasting Veronica's usual CB handle. In theory, the Reapers would chase the decoy, clearing the path for the reload to escape unnoticed high risk, high reward. Dave summed up, pushing away from the table. But if there's a chance to break through their lines, this is it. Sophia gave a grim smile. I'll do what I can. Maybe broadcast some fake coordinates over the CB, saying I'm heading for a certain exit that'll lure the rapers away. Delgado scribbled on a notepad. I'll have 2 troopers circle around the far side. If we see the reapers massing at the decoy, we can attempt some arrests. But Miss Pierce, if Ravenhawk suspects a trick Veronica finished for him, he'll come looking for me, and the real cargo she glanced down at Orion, who was now sniffing at Dave's boots, picking up residual scents of gun oil or cleaning fluid. Well, my partners and I have handled worse. Let's just hope it doesn't come to a firefight. Outside, the skies were beginning to burn orange as the sun dipped behind distant mountains. Dave, Carla, and Sophia quickly readied the decoy trailer. They shifted some old crates inside it to make it look convincing. Sophia then rigged a special radio transmitter to replicate Veronica's handle once set. That decoy rig would drive out alone, horns blazing to draw maximum attention. Meanwhile, Veronica prepped to reel truck checking the trailer's latches and verifying the medical refrigeration was stable. She made sure her anti-theft modifications were in place. Manual overrides if someone tried hacking into her trucks. Electronics. No sense underestimating the Reapers, especially if Ravenhawk was truly ex-military and resourceful. In the midst of the flurry, Carla kept an eye on the security. Monitors the Reapers had not yet made a move, but at intervals they'd ride up to the edge of the truck, Haven, rev vengeance, and peel away like sharks, testing a barrier for weakness. The tension made every minute feel like an hour. Finally, as dusk settled into full night, Veronica climbed into the cab with Orion and Titan. She secured the harness on both dogs, tested the microphones in their gear, just in case they needed to coordinate. In the dark, Delgado met her at the door. Remember, he said, we'll be monitoring from a distance, but help might not be close, if you get into real trouble for. Veronica nodded, understood, Sergeant. She gave him a handshake that conveyed both gratitude and the gravity of what lay ahead. Turning to Dave, she offered a small smile. Thank you for everything. With that, she turned the key in the ignition, the truck growling to life under the starry Arizona sky. In her rearview mirror, she could see Sophia's decoy rig also kicking into gear, lights blazing. It was time to put the plan into motion and hope the gamble paid off. Night cloaked the desert in a silent hush, broken only by the rumble of engines. The plan was deceptively simple. Sophia's decoy would drive east on I-40, drawing the Reaper attention, while Veronica took an alternate path north, then veered onto a rugged mining road that curved around the foothills. Delgado had pinned the Reaper base location via intel from Dave's cameras somewhere near an abandoned diner. The big question was whether they'd fall for the decoy in large enough numbers. Veronica navigated her truck carefully through the first few miles, headlights on low beam to avoid standing out. Orion and Titan harnessed and ready. Can the darkness through the cab windows, their acute hearing exceeded human capability, picking up distant rumbles that might be motorcycles. Veronica's stomach was tight with anticipation. She recalled countless nighttime convoys in Afghanistan where the risk of IEDs and ambushes turned every shadow into a potential threat. Meanwhile, the radio chatter told her Sophia was playing her part to perfection. The decoy rig broadcast intermittent messages referencing urgent cargo, repeating some phrase about a tight schedule for Houston. If the Rapers were listening, it was catnip. The big haul they wanted was apparently heading down the main drag. The key to the truths was that no one would suspect Veronica would attempt a far more treacherous route, especially under the cover of darkness. The old mining road was not even on most modern maps, but Dave had offered a worn topographical chart. He'd also given a final word of caution. Sections might be washed out. Watch for rock slides. A few miles in the pavement, ended, replaced by gravel and dirt. The truck jolted over ruts, forcing Veronica to keep her speed low. She risked a glance at the in-cab camera feed, verifying the medical supplies were still secure. Some of these treatments required stable refrigeration, and the system beeped. Softly normal, her earpiece crackled. "Veronica! It's Sophia. I got half a dozen Reapers trailing me. They're closing in, but still keeping distance. Looks like they're suspicious of a trap, but can't resist." A grin touched Veronica's lips. So far, so good. Moments later, Delgado's voice cut in. We have troopers, hidden off exit, 236. If they rush, Sophia's rig will intervene. But be advised, our scans show a second group of bikers not joining the chase. Possibly 15 or 20 still near the diner could be waiting for something else. Something else. Veronica suspected that something else might be Ravenhawk's arrival. If he had deeper knowledge of her training and her dogs, he might suspect a trick. She set her jaw, determined to keep going. Every bump in the road jarred her bones, the truck suspension groaning in protest. Orion uttered a soft growl, as if complaining about the rough ride, while Titan remained intensely quiet. Suddenly, the darkness ahead was pierced by a set of headlights far off, but definitely there. And they weren't stationary. Veronica's heart leapt into her throat. Could be just a rancher or another trucker. But in this scenario, any unaccounted-for vehicle was a risk. She reached for the radio, intending to warn Delgado she might not be alone on this back road. When the headlights disappeared behind a low rise, a prickle of dread tingled along Veronica's spine. "Buckle up," she whispered to the dogs, half expecting an ambush around the next corner. If Ravenhawk had predicted her strategy, she could be heading right into a well-laid trap. But there was no turning back. Medical supplies for children depended on her pressing forward. Night had fully claimed the desert by the time Veronica Pierce steered her heavily loaded truck onto the old mining road, the headlights casting elongated beams through the swirling dust, under the star-studded sky. The remote landscape appeared both majestic and foreboding. Steep rock walls, winding dirt paths, and the echo of distant wind all seemed to conspire against her in the passenger seat. Orion and Titan maintained watch, their eyes reflecting the ambient glow of the dashboard. Their postures were tense, but controlled, an unmistakable sign. They sensed something amiss. The radio chatter had hinted at multiple groups of Desert Reapers splitting off. Sergeant Delgado's partial intel confirmed that many bikers were lured away by Sofia Ramirez's decoy truck on the main highway. Yet Veronica couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling that the real danger lay right where she was headed. The best-trained criminals, possibly led by an ex-military operative named Ravenhawk, would not chase an obvious lure. They would anticipate an alternative route, one that a seasoned handler like Veronica might choose in a crisis. She recalled her last deployment in a similar environment overseas, where twisting canyon roads could conceal entire squads of insurgents whenever her convoy encountered narrow paths hemmed in by cliffs. It was a standard joke among her fellow soldiers that we might as well be driving into a giant funnel. There was no laughter here, though only the hum of her engine and the pounding of her pulse. Visions of previous ambushes floated up unbidden, reminding her how easily a blockade at the far end of a canyon combined with snipers on the cliffs could trap even the most armored vehicle trying to steady her near nerves. She cast a glance at the digital gauge on her dashboard, which showed the interior refrigeration unit holding steady at optimal temperature. The lives of children back in Houston depended on these specialized medications. One slip-up, one bullet through the wrong section of the trailer, or one forced delay long enough to spoil the meds. and her entire mission would fail. That grim reality lent her a laser focus with every jostle of the suspension. She scanned the road ahead for signs of movement. A glint of metal, a silhouette out of place. The flicker of a muzzle, flash one, near invisible flick of her left hand, confirmed that her strobe and smoke systems were armed. Another glance to the side ensured her pistol lay within easy reach. Ahead, the dirt track narrowed significantly, forcing her to drop her speed. The steep canyon walls on either side seemed to close in the beams from her headlights, dancing across ancient stone etched by decades of wind and erosion. Even on a calm bottom, the route would be treacherous for a fully loaded 18-wheeler at night, under potential threat of an armed ambush. It felt like attempting to land a plane on a tight jungle airstrip while under fire. Yet, she pressed on, heart-hammering hands steady on the wheel, because she had no other choice. Orion and Titan, as if sensing her determination, positioned themselves at the edges of the passenger seat, scanning the darkness. They had accompanied her on missions that sometimes felt impossible, and knew the difference between routine vigilance and high alert. Now was definitely the latter, a low rumble echoed off the canyon walls, and for a moment she tensed, unsure whether it was thunder or distant motorcycle engines. The sky overhead remained mostly clear, the faint outline of the Milky Way arching above them, no sign of storm clouds, which meant that ominous vibration was likely mechanical in origin. Her stomach nodded. She took a deep breath, speaking softly into the mic connected to the short-range radio. "Sergeant Delgado, I'm on the mining route, hearing something, not sure what might be. Engines, please. Advise? Only static," replied. Either the canyon disrupted the signal, or the Reaper's rumored jamming equipment had come online. Either possibility was, grim Veronica leaded out a slow, controlled exhale, struggling to maintain composure under the claustrophobic darkness. She recalled the training she'd hammered into Orion and Titan back in her days as a full-time military K9 handler. Stay calm. Fear feeds the enemy dogs. Of course, picked up on human anxiety. And if she lost her nerves, so would they. Her sense of dread deepened when Titan issued a short, sharp bark, a warning that something or someone was very close. Orion wind ears swiveling toward the canyon wall to the left, with a firm grip on the steering wheel. Veronica began scanning that direction, shining her auxiliary spotlight across jagged rocks in sparse desert brush. Initially, she saw nothing but crumbling stone formations. Then she noticed a faint reflection, perhaps the glint of polished metal. Under moonlight. It vanished almost instantly, as though whoever held it ducked out of sight. Her pulse surged. She flicked her spotlight again, sweeping the area, but no additional sign appeared. "We're not alone," she muttered under her breath. Titan responded with a low growl, confirming her suspicion. The route ahead still angled downward, the sides looming higher. She recognized she was driving into a perfect kill zone, minimal maneuvering room. Easy, vantage points for snipers or armed watchers. Her truck modifications could repel. Small arms fire for a time, but it wasn't invulnerable. High-caliber weapons or a well-placed explosive could stop her cold. A pang of fear twisted her gut as she recalled the rumors swirling around Ravenhawk. Officially, he was a disgraced ex-soldier, rumored to have sold advanced K9 training protocols and specialized gear to the highest bidder. Unofficially, some said he'd lead entire squads of rogue operators and hush-hush missions that skirted every moral line in the book. If he was out here commanding the Desert Reapers, then standard intimidation tactics wouldn't suffice. They'd want not just the cargo, but also her dogs. Orion and Titan were precisely the kind of assets that black market boo-firers coveted. Proven, decorated, and deadly under the right command. A memory flitted across Veronica's mind, a night in Kandahar, pinned by insurgent fire. Orion's ears alert, Titan's nose sniffing out an enemy combatant hidden behind a half-collapsed wall. The dogs had turned a desperate standoff into a rout, flushing the attacker into the open and allowing her squad to regain the advantage. That unbreakable trust between handler and dog, that bond tested by countless life-or-death situations, was not something that could be purchased or copied from a manual. Yet Hawk apparently believed otherwise, that with the right mix of intimidation, training, and cruelty, any K9 could be made a weapon under his control. The idea infuriated her, kindling a spark of defiance in her chest. "Not my dogs," she breathed. The path took a sharp turn, and the canyon walls rose taller, narrowing the starry slice of sky overhead to a thin strip. Veronica switched to a lower gear, mindful that a sudden jerk or rock slide could unbalance the trailer. The hum of the refrigeration system felt ominously loud in the tight space, reminding her how fragile the medical cargo's integrity was. If those systems failed, or the truck was incapacitated for too long, the specialized medications could spoil, and children hundreds of miles away would pay the price. Another beep from the console told her the environment was still stable so far, so good. She was a mere 100 yards into this tighter section of road when Orion and Titan went from tense watchfulness to full-blown alarm. Their bodies stiffened, hackles raised, and Titan gave an urgent bark that practically said, "We have to act now." Veronica's eyes darted across the dashboard, searching for anything on her sensors or external cameras. At first, she saw only the swirling dust in her headlights. Then, out of nowhere, flashes lit up the dark canyon, and she realized the ambush had begun in earnest. A burst of gunfire peppered the truck's hood bullets, pinging off the ballistic plating like hail on a tin roof. Veronica slammed the gas pedal, steering wildly to keep the rig moving. Stopping now would mean certain doom. Orion and Titan barked furiously, but stayed in their seats, waiting for her command. Rather than throwing themselves against the windows, she forced down the urge to panic, letting her military instincts take over. Focus on driving, survive the initial volley, then deploy. Countermeasures, she reminded herself. Words echoing like a drill sergeant's mantra. A second hail of bullets cracked the driver's side mirror, sending shards of glass scattering into the night. The ballistic window took several impacts, spider webbing but not fully breaking. Thank God for those upgrades, she thought fleetingly. She reached for the control panel near the cup holder and toggled the truck's flashers. Instantly, the rig lit up with an intense strobe effect, red and white lights pulsing in disorienting rhythms in a battlefield scenario. It was enough to confound night vision equipment and throw off an ambusher aim. Even with advanced tactics, the rapers, or whoever was firing, might struggle to track a strobing target. Her earpiece crackled momentarily, picking up partial words. Something about reapers converge. Pierce, then cut out again. She couldn't rely on help. She was alone out here, except for her dogs. With gritted teeth, she swerved around a jutting rock wheel skidding on gravel. The trailer lurched dangerously to the left, but she corrected. In time, the world outside became a chaos of flashing lights. Dust muzzle flare and ricocheting gunfire. Orion snarled, pressing his nose to the windshield. Veronica dared a quick glance to see men on the canyon rim above, silhouetted by the probing. They aimed downward, muzzle flashes spitting like fireflies. Another wave of bullets clanged off the top of the cab. She tried to suppress a surge of anger. Desert Reapers was one thing, wild, brazen criminals on bikes. But these coordinated shooters with vantage points above and specialized gear signaled a more disciplined outfit. Ravenhawk had likely spent days or weeks preparing this perfect choke point inside the cab. The temperature gauge beeped, reminding her of the cargo's fragility. Each bullet that slammed into the truck threatened more than her life. It threatened dozens of innocent children's chances at survival. That knowledge fueled her determination. She refused to let these criminals cause a humanitarian disaster. No matter how many ambushers, no matter how advanced their gear, she had to get through the canyon floor, sloped upward if she could. Crest that rise, maybe she could outdistance the shooters. However, a fresh onslaught of gunfire erupted from ahead, where the terrain pinched even tighter. Sparks flashed like angry fireflies across her windshield. She forced the truck to keep rolling each second, feeling like an hour in her peripheral vision. She caught Titan shifting his weight from paw to paw, a sign he was amped up, ready to defend, if they got boarded. But for now, she needed them. Inside, her best line of defense was the truck's armor, not a direct dog assault in the open, under heavy fire. At last, she reached the steepest portion of the incline, the engine straining mightily as the rig struggled up. Loose gravel gunshots continued, but fewer now, as if the attackers were scrambling to reposition for a better angle. The strobe lights cast wild shadows on the canyon walls, turning the battleground into a nightmarish kaleidoscope. Veronica braced herself for a possible blockade at the top. She recalled a tactic from overseas insurgents would let a convoy push uphill, then drop a truck or a barrier from above, forcing them to halt. She prepared to slam on the brakes if anything large appeared in her path. But nothing came, only the continuing rattle of occasional gunfire. Perhaps the ambushers had counted on disabling her truck earlier under the most intense crossfire gritting her teeth. Veronica coaxed the rig over the ridge. The front tires caught traction, pulling the trailer up and out of the narrowest section. She exhaled a shaky breath as the canyon widened slightly, but the relief was short-lived. In the flickering glow of her strobe, she spotted a new threat waiting on a plateau. Another vehicle, smaller but agile, revving its engine like a predator preparing to pounce. The new arrivals on the plateau wasted no time. Veronica heard the unmistakable pop of a rifle shot and a bullet slammed into the front grille. She cursed under her breath, flicking the strobe pattern to a randomized sequence she'd programmed earlier. The truck's lights began pulsing in irregular intervals, an effect designed to throw off even the best marksman. Orion barked at the windshield muzzle pressed against the glass, as if challenging the unseen enemy. Titan paced along the passenger seat, occasionally placing a paw on the door handle. Veronica recognized it as a sign of readiness for deployment, an old training method where the dog would indicate they were prepared to exit the vehicle if needed. A flash in the rearview mirror made her stomach clench. Another set of headlights bouncing up the incline behind her, presumably more of the ambush team. The canyon funnel had succeeded in one respect. It forced her into a kill box, and now they were closing in from both sides. She tapped the console to check if her rear smoke canisters had recharged. A green light indicated they were ready. One more trick in her arsenal, but it had limitations. Smoke gave cover, but at night, with potential thermal optics in play, it might not be a perfect shield. Still, it was better than nothing. Biting her lip, Veronica weighed her options ahead. The agile off-road vehicle seemed poised to block her route behind more hostiles. Advance with guns. She could guess their plan, box her in, and force a surrender. Then they could take the cargo. And worse, her dogs. They probably didn't care if she lived or died, so long as they secured the prized assets. A sudden wave of protective fury for Orion and Titan surged within her. These criminals had no idea what it took to forge a bond with a military K9. They treat her, partners, like machines, not living, loyal creatures with hearts. bigger than some humans. She flicked the mic. "This is Pierce, to anyone on this channel. Ambush on old mining road, pinned from front and rear. No route to bypass request. Immediate backup." The only reply was static, followed by a garbled fragment that sounded like Delgado's voice. But it was impossible to decipher another jam or simple interference from the rugged terrain shots rang out again, and she felt the truck shudder as something likely a bullet lodged in the left front panel. The engine coughed, but kept running. If the engine block got hit in just the right spot, she'd be dead in the water. She pressed the pedal to the floor, trying to intimidate the off-road vehicle ahead. If she could get them to veer aside, maybe she could barrel through the smaller truck. Revved loudly, swerving slightly, but a series of muzzle flashes from its passenger window sent a barrage of rounds into her trailer's side. The ballistic plating held, though the noise hammered her ears in the swirling chaos of strobing lights, dust clouds, and gunfire. She spotted movement up on the plateau's edge. Silhouettes of 2 or 3 men hurrying to set up. Could be a heavy machine gun, or maybe a spiked barrier. Time felt painfully short. She needed a bold maneuver. With a trembling hand, she flipped the cover on a switch labeled Siren, a klaxon-like. Wail erupted from the truck's exterior speakers, an ear-splitting howl that might disrupt an attacker's concentration. The Reapers and their cohorts didn't flinch. These guys were far from amateurs. Orion and Titan were sensitive to the siren's pitch. Veronica killed the siren almost immediately, not wanting to disorient her own dogs. She realized her set of non-lethal defenses was wearing thin. In a quiet voice, she said, "Boys, we might have to engage up close. Stay ready." Both dogs perked their ears. They knew the shift in her tone. A confrontation outside the truck was dangerous, but if pinned down completely, she might have no choice. She'd trained them for worst-case scenarios, but never wanted to test it under conditions like these, grinding her teeth. Veronica took one last gamble. She angled the truck toward the off-road vehicle blocking her path, relying on intimidation through sheer size. The idea was simple: push them to move or be crushed. She revved her engine, the trailer swaying ominously. The smaller vehicle hesitated, inching sideways in response, but then it accelerated forward, determined to hold its position. A row of muzzle flashes strobed from the driver's side window, bullets pinging off Veronica's grill in rapid succession. At this range, if they targeted her tires, it could be catastrophic, especially on such uneven ground. Time to be unpredictable, she told herself, recalling how enemies in her past missions would freeze if confronted with a tactic they hadn't accounted for. She jerked the wheel hard to the right, aiming at a small gap between the off-road vehicle and a cluster of boulders. The angle was perilously narrow. The truck groaned as its fender scraped the rocks, sending sparks flying into the gloom. One wrong move, and she'd wedge the rig sideways, handing victory to her attackers. But somehow, she threaded the needle, smashing through a smaller boulder with a teeth-rattling crunch. She heard a shriek of torn metal, but she was still moving behind her. The off-road vehicle swerved its driver, likely cursing at the near-miss gunfire, momentarily ceased. As the attackers scrambled to reposition, the rig roared onto the plateau away from the tightest confines of the canyon. For a fleeting second, Veronica glimpsed open desert ahead. Her heart soared with the possibility of escape. But then headlights bloomed in front, revealing yet another set of vehicles cresting a ridge she recognized. Multiple silhouettes, at least 2 motorcycles in a larger SUV or truck. The cavalry of criminals had arrived in force. A sense of grim resignation washed over her. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and far from any reliable backup. Yet surrender was not an option. She refused to hand over either the cargo or her dogs. Titan barked loudly, as if echoing her inner defiance. Orion growled at the windshield, scanning for a direct threat. The reprieve from gunfire lasted mere seconds before fresh shots whizzed past the driver's side. She jerked the wheel again, zigzagging in an attempt to be a difficult target. The rig's tires spat gravel, large chunks flying, as the heavy mass forced its way through the harsh terrain. Suddenly, a high-pitched squeal of feedback erupted in her earpiece followed by Delgado's voice in urgent fragments. Copy. Pierce surrounded. Hold. Then the transmission died. She had no idea if he was telling her to wait for air support or to break through. Given the chaos, the best she could do was survive. She pinned the G, pushing the truck's engine to its limits, hoping to outrun the closing circle of vehicles. Another volley of gunfire hammered the trailer, and the rig lurched, alarming squeal coming from the axle. Her heart plummeted. If the trailer's axle or tires were destroyed, she wouldn't get more than a few yards. The temperature gauge beeped a new warning that the medical fridge was under stress. If the system took a bullet or overheated, all was lost amid the mechanical, amid groans and gunshots. She spotted a shallow ravine off to her left, leading away from the main plateau. It looked passable, though not by much. Could she risk going off trail entirely? If the ground was too soft or pocked with hidden sinkholes, she might get mired an easy target. But if she stayed on the plateau, the newly arrived vehicles would box her in within seconds. She had to choose, and fast. Veronica veered left, taking the ravine with no small measure of desperation. The truck's front tires dipped abruptly. Bouncing violently enough to fling Titan off balance, he let out a yelp, but recovered quickly, replanting his paws. Orion braced himself against the passenger seat. The shift in terrain caused the trailer to tilt dangerously, and Veronica wrestled the steering wheel, praying it wouldn't roll. The beams of her headlights illuminated the jagged slope descending. Into darkness, rocks scraped the underside, sparking and groaning gunfire from above peppered the canyon rim. But the angle now favored her. The pursuers couldn't easily shoot straight down into the ravine. She used that precious moment of partial cover to regain control, easing off the accelerate so as not to break an axle on the rugged ground. Dust clouds billowed around the rig, swirling in the glow of her still-active strobes. Through her side mirror, she saw headlights gathering at the ravine entrance, some bikes or off-road vehicles refusing to let her disappear into the darkness amid the cacophony. Her mind latched onto a single imperative: keep the cargo stable. She reached over and tapped the touchscreen that monitored the refrigerated trailer. Still in acceptable ranges, though the margin was shrinking. The next bullet that pierced a coolant line could ruin it all. And she couldn't allow that. If she made it out, children's lives would be saved. If not, she'd face a savage onslaught and watch the cargo become worthless for a heartbeat. The only sounds were her own labored breathing and the grind of tires on stone. Had the shooters paused, she glanced up through the windshield at the canyon lip. No muzzle flashes, just a faint glow of distant headlights. Possibly they were regrouping or looking for a better vantage. Orion growled low, a reminder that the danger was far from gone. Then the night erupted again. Headlights from the far side of the ravine beamed straight at her, and she realized with a cold jolt that she was not the only one who thought to use this road. Another off-road truck emblazoned with faint scorpion decals. The hallmark of the Reapers stood in her path, engine revving ominously. Of men jumped out, brandishing rifles. They used the truck's hood as cover, taking aim at her windshield, acting on impulse. Veronica slammed the brakes, jarring the rig to a halt. Gunshots pounded the ballistic glass, which already bore multiple spiderweb cracks. She clutched the console, toggling a second wave of smoke canisters. White plumes hissed out from under the trailer, enveloping the ravine in a dense fog through her night vision-equipped dash-cam, another leftover from her service days. She could see shapes moving, but it was hazy at best. Titan let out a furious bark, and Orion's hackles raised their K9 instincts on overdrive. One of the men sprinted forward, apparently planning to yank the driver's door open. Veronica had anticipated such a move. She'd replaced the standard handle with a locked steel plate. He tugged in vain. Cursing shots rang out again, hitting metal. Veronica heard the trailer's exterior crack in a new place, praying it was not the fridge unit. She flicked a lever on the dash. Instantly, external speakers blared a piercing tone akin to a sonic deterrent. The man recoiled, clutching his ears. It bought her a second or two. At least desperate times called for desperate measures. The rational part of her mind screamed that stepping out of the truck was suicide, but remaining inside might lead to the same fate if the Reapers or their associates used heavier weapons. She glimpsed Orion and Titan, adrenaline ready through their taut muscles. They were trained for infiltration, for subduing threats, but employing them in open territory under active fire was a risk she'd seldom had to take. She scanned the swirling smoke for an opening. If she released them, the dogs could flank the attackers, sow confusion, but they also could be hurt or killed. Her heart pounded as a memory surged the day she first met Orion, a bright-eyed pup assigned to her unit. He'd impressed the instructors with uncanny focus. During firefights, she'd spent months refining that raw potential, forging a connection so strong it felt telepathic in the field. Titan joined them later, slightly older, but equally keen, forming an inseparable trio. Together, they navigated countless hazards from IED detection to building raids, and they never failed a mission, now pinned in a ravine by criminals seeking to abduct or kill them. She had no illusions about the stakes. Letting Orion and Titan out might be the only way to break the deadlock. Bullets smacked the truck again, and she heard the hiss of escaping air. Her right front tire, likely the rig, sagged the men behind. The off-road truck were shouting directions to unseen allies, presumably coordinating to encircle her. The swirl of dust and smoke made it hard to pinpoint how many hostiles she faced. 5, 10, possibly more. She cast one final look at the console to confirm the cargo's climate was stable. Then, with trembling resolve, she grabbed her handheld radio and tried one last time. "Delgado, if you can hear me, I'm pinned in a ravine approaching critical, possibly out of options." The radio crackled faintly, then died gently. She placed a hand on Orion's vest and the other on Titan's boys. She whispered, "You remember the infiltration drills? Keep it tight. Watch each other. We do this as a team." Their ears flicked in acknowledgement. She prayed. Ravenhawk hadn't specifically trained these men to handle top-tier K9 infiltration. If they had, well, she'd find out soon. Pressing a button on her harness, she unleashed the locks on the passenger door. She nudged Titan first, giving him a quick gesture to confirm he was go. Then Orion. Both dogs leapt out into the smoky darkness, barely visible. They learned to move low, using the environment to their advantage. The men outside clearly hadn't expected a frontal assault. By wargs, shouts erupted, followed by scuffling noises. Veronica heard a frantic bark from Titan, then a yelp. Fear clenched her gut, but it was followed by a human scream. Good. Titan was still in action, using that distraction. She slipped out the driver's side with her pistol drawn, the air. Reek of gunpowder and hot metal through the haze. She could make out the off-road truck's shape, and one attacker flailing as Ori apparently latched onto his arm. Another rattle of gunfire from behind forced her to flatten herself against the truck's side. If she could neutralize the men blocking the ravine exit, she might push the rig forward on its remaining good tires. A fleeting shape raced through the fog, Titan going after a second gunman near the front of the off-road truck. The man spun, firing wildly. Veronica's heart seized. A bullet whizzed past Titan's flank, but the dog lunged, jaws clamping down on the attacker's weapon arm, forcing it upward. The gun spat rounds into the air harmlessly. She exhaled in relief. Titan was well trained to disarm without lethal force. But in real combat, accidents happened. Meanwhile, Orion pinned the first attacker to the ground. Though that man was still struggling fiercely, Veronica took aim at a third figure silhouetted by the truck's headlights. She fired 3 controlled shots, forcing him to dive for cover. Another muzzle flash from behind told her more enemies were closing in. Gritting her teeth, she turned to retrieve the dogs. They completed the infiltration portion of the drill time to regroup before they got overwhelmed. Crouched by the rig's side, Veronica whistled sharply in a specific pattern. A recall command. She counted 2 seconds. Then felt, rather than saw, Orion's bulky presence at her left. Titan joined a heartbeat later, panting but uninjured. Each dog's vest was scuffed, and Titan's muzzle had a streak of something dark. Likely the attacker, blood or dirt from the scuffle. The immediate threat from these 2 gunmen was neutralized for the moment. But new headlights on the ridge signaled more reinforcements. Time was a luxury she didn't have. She had to make a split decision, keep fighting on foot, or try to get the truck moving again if the rig couldn't roll. The cargo was doomed, and so was she. Summoning a reservoir of composure, she nudged Orion and Titan back into the passenger seat. They'd done their distracting the attackers, creating chaos, but she needed them inside if they were to outrun. Whatever new wave approached, the dogs leapt obediently through the door. She held open, though Titan threw a quick glance at the nearest down attacker, ensuring no sudden move threatened Veronica. Clambering in behind them, she slammed the door, shut pistol still in hand. Through the windshield she glimpsed the battered shape of the off-road truck. Its driver's seat was empty, the occupant likely having fled or been injured in the scuffle. Smoke thickened in the ravine, swirling in eddies. Under the strobe lights, she risked a look at the front tires. One definitely flat, but the rim might still be operable enough to inch forward. The bigger concern was the trailer. If the wheel assembly was too damaged, they wouldn't go far. Bullets pinged off the rear of her truck again, and she realized the pursuers behind her had arrived on the scene, possibly discovering their fellow attackers incapacitated. She pounded the X accelerator anyway. The engine roared, the chassis groaning. The truck lurched forward, crumpling the off-road truck's fender as it pushed past. Metal shrieked against metal. Veronica's rig heaved, straining under the uneven load. She felt something catch, then snap. Her pulse hammered as the trailer threatened a jackknife for a terrifying instant. She thought they'd be stuck for good. But then, with a sickening jolt, the rig broke free. A trail of sparks marked their passage. Shots continued to pepper. The trailer, the ballistic plating saved them from immediate penetration, but every impact risked fracturing the reefer unit or disabling crucial systems. She pressed the strobe control, again alternating the flash pattern in hopes of ruining the pursuer's aim. Orion and Titan braced themselves, eyes fixed on the outside chaos in the mirror. She could see 2 or 3 headlights weaving in the dust. Likely motorcycles or off-road trucks giving chase. The ravine sloped downward. If she could just navigate it without tipping over, maybe she'd emerge onto flatter ground, or a secondary road behind her. The men she'd left battered in the dust were quickly replaced by a fresh wave. She heard engines revving, shouts in the night. The cargo monitor beeped incessantly, screaming about the trailer's vibrations and potential coolant line damage over the ruckus. She spoke to the dogs, voice shaky but resolute. "Hang on, guys, we're almost through." She had no idea if that was true, but the words steadied her. She refused to give in to despair as they tore deeper into the winding ravine. The road turned into a hazard-laden track. Boulders littered the path, and the walls grew dangerously tight again. Veronica prayed she wouldn't corner herself in another kill box. Checking the dashboard once more, she noted that her fuel gauge had dropped significantly from all the heavy revving. She had to find a route back to more open ground. Soon, she glimpsed a flicker of headlight lights behind a rock formation, a probable pincer movement. They were trying to trap her from two sides again. At least she still had the advantage of the truck's defensive measures, but they wouldn't last forever. The ravine abruptly opened into a bowl-shaped clearing ringed by high cliffs that shimmered under the strobe lights. Reflection. Here, the dust settled enough for Veronica to see that her path forward was blocked by a collapsed rock formation. Likely a detour from the old mining days, she skidded to a halt. Tires protesting, the left side seemed passable, but only if she navigated a narrow gap next to a sheer drop-off. Grimacing, she realized if she attempted that with the trailer in its damaged state, she risked sliding into the abyss, but staying put meant the attackers would swarm her in minutes. Her heart hammered, searching for an alternative. She spotted what looked like a rusted chain-link gate set into the cliff face, a possible entrance to an abandoned mine shaft or storage area. If it could fit her truck, it might offer a brief hideout. She flicked her headlights in that direction, revealing a battered sign, "No entry, danger." The gate was partly bent large enough that an 18-wheeler could potentially squeeze through with some maneuvering, better than waiting out in the open. She revved the engine again, plowing toward the gate. It squealed in protest as the truck's front end forced it open wider. Twisting metal rods aside behind her, she heard a roar of engines as the chase vehicles closed in. Bullets whined a few, sparking off the rear bumper. The dogs barked in unison as if urging her to hurry. Finally, with an ear-splitting screech, the gate gave way. The front tires rolled onto cracked concrete, an old mining facility, perhaps with a wide, empty cavern. Sweat trickled down Veronica's temple as she eased the truck forward into the darkness. The overhead clearance was just enough, though the trailer scraped the ceiling in place, showering sparks. She flipped off the strobe lights, relying on the truck's internal beams and a few overhead lamps that flickered faintly to life. Powered by who knew what residual electricity, she glimpsed rusted rails on the ground, an old mine cart off to one side. The couture widened into a large central chamber that might have once been used for processing ore. Thick pillars of stone and metal supports dotted the interior. She had no clue how stable the structure was. Shouts echo from outside the gate. The pursuers had seen her enter. Now, the question was whether they'd follow. If they did, she might face a firefight in a cramped tunnel. If they hesitated, she had a slim window to figure out an escape route. She killed the engine, letting the rigs settle in a space near a massive support column, and cut all external lights. Darkness engulfed them, interrupted only by the faint glow of the dash. For a moment, Orion and Titan panted, eyes shining, scanning the blackness. The harsh beep of the Reaper unit's alert felt deafening. In the hush, muffled voices came from near the entrance. Flashlight beams pierced the gloom, dancing across broken machinery. Veronica slid down in her seat, feeling her heart throb in her throat. This was beyond precarious. It was a full-blown infiltration scenario inside a dilapidated mine with an unknown number of armed hostiles in her cargo on the brink of ruin. She bit her lip, trying to craft a new plan. Did she hold position, attempt to pick them off if they entered, or did she slip out on foot? Find advantage to ambush them first. Every second counted the medical supplies needed stable conditions. The trailer was battered, but so far operational, another well-placed shot. However, might destroy its cooling system, her radio was silent. No sign of Delgado's cavalry. She had to assume that for now, it was just her, Orion, and Titan against however many criminals had closed in war zone. Logic, secure. Your perimeter, gather intel, strike fast. If cornered, if she let them control the pace, she was finished, drawing a steadying breath. Veronica whispered to her dogs, "All right, let's do this." She engaged the manual locks on the doors, though that was more symbolic than genuinely protective at this point. Then she grabbed a flashlight with a red filter to preserve night vision, slid out of the driver's seat, and eased open the small side hatch behind the cab. That hatch was initially designed for quick maintenance checks, but could also serve as a discreet exit. Orion followed first, silent as a shadow. Titan stayed close at her heel. Together, they slipped into the mine's cavernous darkness. The air inside the mine was stale, tinged with the smell of damp. Earth and rust, scattered debris, crunched underfoot. Her red-filtered flashlight revealed massive pillars supporting the rock overhead, plus half-buried tracks leading deeper into the complex. A tangle of wires and old conveyor belts suggested this place had once been a bustling operation. Now it was an abandoned tomb of industrial relics, a perfect lair for an ambush. She heard footsteps echo near the mine entrance, accompanied by muted voices. They were definitely coming in. Her heart pounded in sin. With the footsteps, she crouched behind a rusted beam. Orion and Titan flanking her in practice formation. Her dogs had been trained for infiltration in dimly lit warehouses, but this environment was more claustrophobic and potentially unstable. A stray bullet in the wrong spot could cause a collapse. She heard scraping metal as the attackers presumably tried to move her truck or approach it. Their flashlights danced across the interior, occasionally, illuminating massive dust modes swirling in the stale air. Veronica exhaled softly, her mind racing. She could attempt to pick them off stealthily, but every shot risked giving away her position. Worse, a ricochet might pierce the reefer trailer. The darkness gave her an idea. She rummaged quietly in her vest pouch, retrieving a small canister. It was a leftover from a special operations kit, essentially a localized smoke bomb that also emitted bursts of infrared strobing pulses, perfect for disorienting opponents with night vision. She placed it at the base of a pillar, set a short timer, and motioned for the dogs to follow her deeper into the shadows. They moved with silent discipline, their nails barely clicking on the stone floor. Moments later, a hiss signaled the canister activation, followed by dull pops of strobe. Shouted curses echoed as the intruders reeled from the unexpected. Onslaught flashlights whipped around beams, stuttering across the haze. Veronica seized the opportunity to shift positions, heading toward the far side of the chamber. She wanted to be behind them, if possible, controlling the vantage in the flickering chaos. She caught a glimpse of a tall figure stepping forward, calm in the midst of disarray. He wore some sort of tactical vest, moving with the confidence of someone used to commanding Ravenhawk. She couldn't confirm from this distance, but the posture hinted at leadership. He barked orders in a low, resonant voice, telling his men to spread out. Find her, secure the dogs, and don't damage the trailer more than necessary. We need that cargo intact. The words reverberated in Monica's ears, fueling her dread. They fully intended to take not just the shipments, but Orion and Titan. She tightened her grip on her pistol. Her vantage behind a toppled conveyor belt offered partial cover. Through the gaps, she saw at least 5 armed figures fanning out through the mine. One carried a short-barreled rifle, scanning left and right. Another fiddled with a handheld device, perhaps a thermal scanner. She silently cursed that technology, which could reveal her or the... If they lingered in one spot too long, Orion pressed against her leg, eyes fixed on the intruders. Titan's breathing was rapid but controlled. Waiting for Aegon to move some part of her, realized this had escalated. Beyond a mere hijacking attempt, Ravenhawk's name had popped up in intelligence circles for selling stolen data on training K9s as paramilitary assets. He apparently recognized the unique value of military working dogs and the potential profit in selling them to unscrupulous contractors. If he truly was leading this assault, then capturing Orion and Titan might be a top priority, overshadowing even the medical supplies. Veronica's jaw clenched. She would die before letting that happen. The man with the possible thermal scanner started sweeping the device across the chamber. She couldn't stay still yet, moving wrist, exposing them. If he looked their way, she glanced around for an alternate path. The collapsed corridor behind them might offer a route deeper into the mine. A sign overhead read, "Tunnel B, authorized personnel. Only if it wasn't fully caved in, she might slip past with the buns, maybe loop around and outflank." The intruders, she beckoned the dogs with a hand signal. They moved quietly, hugging the conveyor edge until they reached a side passage at the threshold. She halted. A large chunk of the ceiling had collapsed here, debris creating a precarious slope, but a gap near the top suggested there might be space to squeeze through. She flicked her red filter flashlight upward, noting jagged rebar and precarious stone overhead. One loud noise might bring it crashing down. Still, it was better than staying put and risking a direct confrontation with a half-dozen heavily armed men and possibly more. On the way, gently, she tested the first bit of debris with her boot, wincing at the crunch it made. Titan whined softly as if to say, "Is this really the best option?" She placed a reassuring hand on his harness. "We've done worse," she muttered, recalling a collapsed building they'd navigated overseas, searching for wounded soldiers. Carefully, she began to climb, motioning for Orion and Titan to follow. The dogs were agile, but even they had limits on steep rubble below. Voices grew louder. Veronica risked a quick peek. One figure moved closer to the truck, shining a flashlight inside the cab. "She's not here," he hissed. Another silhouette joined him, rummaging around. Then came the voice again, low and controlled. "Almost definitely Ravenhawk. She must be on foot, spread out. We want her alive, but the dogs shoot if they resist. We can break their spirit later." Veronica felt a surge of fury. These scum thought her partners were just tools to be bent or broken. The notion solidified her resolve to vanish into the tunnels and strike on her own terms. Her foot slipped on a loose rock, sending a clatter that echoed far too loudly. Immediately, flashlights swung in her direction. She froze, flattening herself behind a slab of concrete. Orion and Titan did the same, trained to go motionless when a slip-up threatened exposure. Heart pounding, she listened as footsteps and urgent whispers converged. Someone aimed a beam at the rubble pile just beneath her. Another half step, and they'd spot her. She tried to steel her racing breath, every muscle taut with anticipation. An agonizing few seconds passed the beam of light, hovering inches from Veronica's position. One dog sniff from T.I. or a faint pant from Orion could betray them, but her loyal companions remained utterly silent. At last, the searcher's flashlight angled away. "Nothing up here," he muttered to the others. Though skepticism colored his tone, Veronica silently thanked. Whatever luck still graced her, she waited a moment more, then continued, inching up the collapsed slope, mindful of each shifting rock. The dogs followed in near-perfect unison, their nails scraping lightly against concrete, breaking over the top of the rubble. She found a partially intact pewter pitch, black and littered with debris. From the cave-in, twisted metal rails jutted from the ground, and the air smelled of mold, and wet stone water dripped from the ceiling in rhythmic plinks, suggesting a possible groundwater seep. She tested the floor with careful steps, hoping it was stable enough to support them. The corridor stretched maybe 30 yards, ending in a heavy metal door, battered by time. If it led to an exit, she might circle around behind the intruders or find a way to signal Delgado. She hurried forward, Orion at her side. Titan, trailing behind, is scanning the darkness. A faint clang from behind made her freeze more rubble, sliding, or had someone decided to follow? She couldn't be certain. The corridor's damp hush magnified every sound, setting her nerves on edge gently. She tried the door's handle. It resisted. Rust fused to the frame. Frustration coiled in her gut. "Come on," she hissed, putting her shoulder into it. The door groaned, but held behind her. Titan let out a muffled bark, not loud, but enough to indicate movement nearby. She whirled flashlight, slicing the gloom, and spotted a faint silhouette halfway up the collapsed slope. Light beams from the main chamber flickered behind him, though not enough to reveal a clear face. He crept carefully, gun raised, scanning the quarter for signs of her. "They're in here somewhere," she heard whisper into a mic. "Yeah, she's got the dogs with her." Orders? Veronica's stomach twisted. If that man carried a mic, others were undoubtedly hearing. She had seconds before a group might rush in, gritting her teeth. She resumed pushing against the corroded door. It gave an inch, scraping across the floor. The silhouette froze, pivoting his flashlight. She flicked off her own to avoid immediate detection, plunging herself into near-total darkness. Orion and Titan pressed closer to her legs, ready to defend another inch. Another ear-splitting groan of metal. She winced at how loud it was. The figure's beam locked onto the door, and a shot rang out, ricocheting off the frame. She ducked, adrenaline spiking. If he advanced, she'd be forced to return fire, risking a bullet tearing into the precarious ceiling, or the reefer trailer behind her. If they retreated in a final burst of determination, she heaved against the door with all her might. It screeched open just wide enough for her. And the dogs, "Go!" she hissed. Orion slipped through first. Titan right behind him. A second shot ricocheted overhead, showering dust from the ceiling. Veronica squeezed in, dragging the door shut. A bullet pinged the metal, but the door slammed, locking her in an even blacker space. She heard the handle rattle on the other side as the intruder tried to yank it open. Without pause, she hefted a broken metal rod lying nearby and jammed it into the door hinges, creating a makeshift wedge. Then she lurched backward, swallowing the claustrophobic panic that threatened to consume her. The darkness was absolute. Even her red-filtered flashlight revealed only swirling dust motes in a narrow corridor leading away from the door. She clicked it off again, not wanting to give away her exact position. If the intruder forced the door, heart pounding, she crouched to catch her breath. Orion nosed her thigh gently as if to check she was unheard. She felt a scratch along her forearm. She must have nicked herself on the rubble or a piece of jagged metal, but it was superficial compared to the potential injuries waiting. If they faced a direct gunfight, an odd hush settled, broken only by faint banging on the door behind her and the distant drip of water. She realized she was shaking, adrenaline forging a cold sweat down her spine. In that moment, all the tension, fear, and desperate determination crystallized in a single thought. Ravenhawk's men wouldn't stop. They might blow the door, find another route through the route. These tunnels she had to keep moving, had to find a way out and re-establish contact with Delgado. She pressed forward, feeling along the quarter walls. Water trickled underfoot, forming shallow puddles. This deeper area of the mind might connect to an old elevator shaft or a ventilation system. The dogs padded alongside her uncomplaining, though she could tell from Titan's occasional whine that the raw tension wore on them. 2. She paused to check the battered radio clipped to her vest. Still no signal. The rocky overhead pressed down a silent reminder that this environment could become a tomb if anything triggered to collapse. At last, the corridor opened into a broader chamber. Using her flashlight sparingly, she scanned the area. Rusted machinery, what looked like large or carts on a track that disappeared into a black tunnel. A sign, half corroded, read, "Maintenance Shaft, Exit 3. Could that be a route to the surface? The ominous rumble of shifting stone overhead gave her no time to dwell. She had to pick. "A path we're going for the shaft," she whispered to Orion and Titan. Their ears perking at her voice, she hoped the label Exit 3 meant an actual egress above ground, not a dead end as they crossed the chamber. The scrape of metal on stone behind them signaled the door might be giving way. Distant voices echoed, confirming the chase hadn't been abandoned. Veronica clenched her jaw, feeling a renewed surge of protectiveness, no matter the sea, that she wouldn't let them take her dogs. She'd come too far, risk too much, and carry the hopes of those children on her back. This fight was no longer about just delivering medical supplies. It was about dismantling an operation that treated living beings, human or canine, as mere commodities stepping onto the Orchard track. She felt a slight incline beneath her feet. The stale air grew colder, suggesting a vertical shaft might lie ahead. The dogs added carefully, noses quivering at the musty scents. Veronica's mind raced, planning her next move if the shaft could be scaled. Maybe she could call Dogado from higher ground. If not, she'd have to improvise yet again. Her only consolation was that the Reapers, for all their numbers and equipment, might not be as adept in pitch-black tunnels with 2 trained canines stalking them. Some primal part of her relished the idea of turning the tables. Yet even as she inched forward, a new concern fed the reefer trailer along with her truck was still in the main chamber. Vulnerable if the attackers sabotaged it or discovered the cargo's refrigeration system, they could destroy everything she'd fought to preserve. She had to circle back eventually, or this entire mission would fail. That thought weighed on her like an anvil. Rescue the cargo fight off Raven's men, protect the BOS. She was juggling too many objectives for one person. But she had no choice. Squaring her shoulders, she set her flashlight to a low beam and advanced into the blackness. Orion and Tian resolute at her side, ready for whatever horror or salvation they might find in these forsaken depths. Veronica Pierce advanced deeper into the old mining tunnels, each step weighted by worry for her stranded truck and the precious cargo within it. The corridor sloped upward, the ore cart tracks clattering faintly beneath her boots as she tried to keep a low profile. Orion and Titan patted beside her nails, scraping soft echoes in the oppressive dark. Every so often, the dogs paused to sniff at the musty air or glance back the way they'd come. Alert to any sign of pursuit, Veronica imagined Ravenhawk men tearing through the mine, searching for ways around the barricaded door. The thought made her heart pound like a ward drum. She was running out of time to keep them away from the refrigerated trailer that housed life-saving medications. Her red filter flashlight cut a narrow path along crumbling support beams and gnarled lumps of mineral deposits that had once been the lifeblood of this operation. Now the mine was a tomb of rust and broken machinery, the perfect stage for a lethal cat-and-mouse game. Veronica's plan was twofold: find higher ground to attempt a radio signal, and if possible, circle back to the main chamber from an unexpected angle. She needed the element of surprise. Her only advantage over the heavily armed group outside, she couldn't fight them all face to face in the open, not with the tow's safety and the cargo's integrity at stake. Despite her grim circumstances, she felt a flicker of hope. The air was growing fresher, and the track underfoot seemed better maintained, suggesting it led to a more recently used exit. Perhaps the old ventilation or elevator shafts were still functional enough to provide an escape route. If she reached the surface, maybe she could hail Sergeant Delgado or any law enforcement unit in range. She also thought of Sophia Armir, hopefully still tying up the bulk of the Desert Reapers out on the highways or even drawing them away from this remote hideout. But Ren Hawk's unit was different, better trained, more disciplined, and clearly fixated on capturing or killing her for the sake of those dogs and the specialized medicine. A muffled crash from somewhere behind made Veronica freeze. The dogs responded immediately, ears perked, hackles rising. She killed her flashlight to avoid advertising her location, pressing herself against the rough wall. Through the dark, she listened to the subtle echoing footsteps. Several men, 3, maybe 4, were moving in the distant corridors, calling out to each other in clip commands. The sense of being hunted pressed in on her. Her mind revisited those nights in Kahar, pinned down by insurgents who knew every Y and crevice there. She'd managed to outwit them using her dog's uncanny detection skills and her ability to remain calm. Under pressure, now she channeled that same discipline with careful motions. She guided Orion and Titan to an adjoining shaft marked by a collapse sign that might have once read "Caution Elevator." If there was an elevator or a vertical climb, it might be her best chance to find a vantage point or a second exit. Just before she turned, she heard faint voices filtering through the gloom. "Keep searching. She can't have gone far. Raven wants the dogs intact. Remember, if they come at you, drop them." Her jaw tightened. The men sounded close, and their confidence oozed from every syllable. They assumed they had the upper hand. Veronica vowed to prove them wrong. She flicked on the flashlight again, found the corridor leading to a half-open steel door, and ushered the dogs through, hoping it would lead her to the high ground. She desperately needed another long passage, neck deeper into the mine complex, the air growing cooler and more humid. Veronica's boots slipped on patches of damp stone, forcing her to slow. Titan let out a near-silent whine, as though protesting the labyrinthian trek, while Orion stayed stoically focused, nose twitching at every new odor. High overhead, thin beams of rotted wood creaked under the weight of the mountain. Above one catastrophic tremor could bring the entire shaft down on their heads, a possibility that curdled Veronica's stomach. Yet her greatest fear remained the men behind her. If Raven's team circumvented that barricaded door or discovered a different side tunnel, they could easily flank her. She cursed under her breath for having to abandon her truck, but there had been no real choice. The Reapers were too many, and the mine's enclosed space left her with minimal defensive angles. Worse, the specialized Reaper unit wouldn't last forever under bullet fire, especially if some stray round ruptured the coolant lines. They came to a rusted metal ladder that disappeared upward into pitch. Blackness dimly, Veronica spotted old signage near the base maintenance loft, restricted. It was as good a lead as any. She touched Orion's harness, then Titan's, giving them the standby signal one rung at a time. She climbed the metal, groaning ominously beneath her weight. The dogs waited below, aware from training that climbing a ladder in tandem with a handler was only done on command. She taught them to ascend or descend, short ladders in certain specialized missions, but she dreaded trying it here when she reached the top. Her flashlight revealed a small wooden platform with a battered door on the far side, half caved in. She tested the platform's integrity. It swayed slightly, but held dropping to a crouch. She leaned her head through the opening. A stale rush of air gusted outward, carrying the tang of dust and mold. If it led to another quarter or a side exit, she could get behind Raven's men or even find an overhead van to radio Delgado. Decision made, she clambered back down, carefully, guiding Orion and Titan up one at a time. The dogs performed the maneuver with remarkable grace, hooking their paws on each rung, trusting her steadying grip at the top. The trio gathered on the creaking platform, every sense alive. The door beyond the platform was collapsed enough that only a narrow gap remained. Veronica pressed her ear to the splintered wood, listening for any sign of movement on the other side. Save for the trickle of water somewhere, she pushed tentatively, dislodging a small avalanche of debris that clattered into a darkness beyond. Hard in her throat, she wedged the flashlight in and peered through. What lay beyond set her pulse racing, a small chamber with a rusted metal catwalk overhead, plus some sort of vertical shaft plunging down into blackness. A tangle of old cables and pulleys suggested it had once been an elevator, for hauling ore. The catwalk might grant her a vantage on the main chamber if it connected back, sensing an opportunity to gain the upper hand. Veronica guided Titan and Orion through the gap, mindful of each step on the precarious floor. If she could find advantage to see the main chamber, or at least her truck, she might coordinate a surprise strike. A rumble of voices below, faint but unmistakable, reached her ears. Peering over the edge of the walkway, she saw flickers of flashlight beams in what looked like a tunnel far below. There was no direct line of sight, but the echo suggested a search party. Could they be looking for an alternate route to a rig? Possibly with a trembling breath. She turned off her flashlight. Now was the time for stealth and careful planning. The corridor stretched into a dimly lit expanse that opened onto a grad walkway overlooking a labyrinth of mining shafts by the soft, flickering illumination of old emergency lamps still drawing power from a generator. Somewhere, it seemed Veronica could discern multiple levels connected by rickety stairs and flimsy catwalks. The place looked like a set from a post-apocalyptic movie. Corridors marred by collapsed ceilings, half-buried pieces of machinery, and an array of dust. Laden signage directing workers to old break rooms or supply closets. Trying to stay silent, she crept onto the catwalk, Orion and Titan trailing in single file. A drop of at least 20 feet yawned beneath the grade. If this structure failed, they'd plummet into darkness. Despite the risk, she pressed on. She needed vantage and more. Crucially, a route back to the main chamber. The WCAC of old oil and rust permeated the air, mingling with the sharper tang of burnt powder that still lingered from the shootouts earlier. Halfway along the catwalk, she spied a metal spiral staircase on the far side leading downward. If her sense of direction was correct, that might take her close to the old processing chamber where she'd stashed the truck. Leaning over the railing, she noticed a faint glow below, flashlights cutting across the gloom, accompanied by the faint clank of boots on metal. Raven's men, no doubt. She crouched, straining to catch fragments of their shouts. The truck's over there. Look at all this gear. Did she reinforce the sides? A hawk said. To keep the cargo chilled. Check. If the reefer is still running, we got to find her. Where's the rest of the team? Her heart seized. If they realize the reefer fragility might threaten to sabotage it, unless she surrendered, she bit her lip, mind racing through possible angles of attack if she could get the jump on them from an elevated position, but she only had her pistol and limited ammo. A direct assault risk, bullets flying toward the truck, or worse, Titan and Orion silent and methodical. She moved forward. Orion let out a low, vibrating growl, and Titan's ears flattened. Both dogs sensed her agitation, picking up the tension that radiated from her. She paused, glancing at them. Easy, she mouthed, using a hand signal to indicate stealth. The dogs settled, but their gazes flicked nervously toward the flickering lights below. She reached the end of the catwalk, crouching behind a section of twisted metal that offered partial cover. From here, she finally got a glimpse into the main chamber. Her rig, battered and bullet-riddled, stood near a giant support column. 3 men circled the trailer, shining beams on the reefer unit's vents. A 4th man, armed with what looked like a compact submachine gun, kept watch near the collapse gate. None were looking upward yet, but it was only a matter of time before someone thought to search the catwalk. Adrenaline spiked in her veins. The cargo's refrigeration system was still humming, a faint mechanical whir carrying through the gloom. That was good. The question was how long it could last under these conditions, or how long before one of the criminals lost patience and shot it to force her hand. If Ravenhawk was here, he might use the cargo as leverage, but his prime interest was the bungs. The thought made her skin crawl. She glanced at Orion and Titan, both sets of eyes reflecting the minimal light, as if reaffirming that she would protect them with everything she had. Grinding her teeth, Veronica formulated a plan. Create a diversion. Isolate the men from her trailer, then either secure or destroy crucial parts of their operation. If she could sabotage their vehicles outside, they couldn't easily escape. When, as Delgato finally arrived, but first, she'd have to get down there without being cut to ribbons by submachine gun fire. A tiny sparkle of movement at the far end of the chamber caught Veronica's eye. A figure clad in tactical gear stepped through a side-tunnel posture, radiating authority. Even from her vantage high above, she could see how the other men reacted, snapping to attention. There was no mistaking it. This was Ravenhawk. Though the distance obscured his facial features, the aura of command was unmistakable. He pointed toward the reefer unit, barking orders that echoed off the cavern walls. "Check the coolant lines. We need it intact for now." "Where's the handler?" "The dogs," one of the henchmen shrugged. Still no sign. She went deeper in the tunnels. "I think the place is a maze." Raven lifted a device to his mouth, presumably a radio, and hissed instructions to an unseen team. Veronica's pulse quickened. She suspected there might be more Reapers converging. The false calm of the mind was about to shatter. The moment they started a serious search of the upper levels, they discover her vantage point. She forced her breathing steady with luck. Her knowledge of infiltration tactics and the dog's exceptional training could tilt the odds in her favor. She needed to strike before Raven's men tightened their grip around the chamber. Eyeing the spiral staircase, she realized it led to a short catwalk extension that in turn angled down toward a cluster of old crates in machinery. If she could slip behind those crates unseen, she might place herself within pistol range of the reefer trailer. Perimeter. The main threat was Ravenhawk himself, armed with a more advanced weapon, perhaps night vision or thermal capabilities. Turning to Orion and Titan, she gave them a silent series of hand signals: stealth approach, stay close, attack only on command. Both dogs dipped their heads in acknowledgement. This was it. The kind of high-risk infiltration they had trained for in actual war zones. Except this time, the battlefield was a Daryl mine, and the adversaries wore biker patches instead of foreign uniforms. She began, the descent shoes carefully placed on the spiral steps to minimize noise. The metallic squeaks echoed in her ears like thunder. She froze with every shift of metal, glancing down to ensure no one below looked up. At one point, a beam of flashlight cut across the lower catwalk, forcing her to press herself against the railing. Titan froze mid-step, disciplined enough to hold a near-impossible position. Orion crouched behind a rusted pillar, ears cocked for any sign of detection. Seconds stretched into what felt like hours. Finally, the flashlight shifted away, and the men below resumed tinkering with the reaper. Exterior, one crowbar welding, Thug pried at a side panel, cursing when the reinforced metal refused to yield another, hammered at the trailer's AR, probably trying to see if any valuable items could be swiped easily. Veronica's gut tightened. Those specialized medications might not be street drugs, but certain compounds were highly sought after by illicit labs. At last, she reached the catwalk's lower level. She guided Titan and Orion onto a narrow walkway that led behind a towering stack of ancient crates. The dogs waited silent but quivering with tension. From here, Veronica peered through a gap in the crates. She was maybe 20 yards from the trailer. Within earshot of the men, she could see Ravenhawk's silhouette near the front of her truck. If she opened fire now, she might drop one or two before the rest returned fire. But that left the reefer at risk. She needed a better distraction, something so chaotic it would scatter them away from the trailer. Veronica's mind flicked through the loadout. She still carried a handful of pistol mags, one more miniature smoke strobe canister, and the dog's harness-based attachments. Orion and Titan each wore a small patch of ballistic fabric along their sides, plus fitted compartments for stealth cameras, though she hadn't had time to activate or mount cameras in this fiasco. The key to infiltration was always disruption. If she could sow enough confusion, her foes might abandon the trailer to hunt her down, allowing her a chance to secure the truck and possibly escape. She spotted a bundle of old wiring coiled at top. The nearest crate likely discarded from the Min's electrical system. Another plan took shape. If she triggered a fire or a short circuit in a crucial area, the men might scatter to contain it, buying her valuable seconds. The risk was immense. An uncontrolled blaze in these tunnels could trap everyone but a small targeted spark. Carefully placed might be enough to send them running without igniting the entire mine. Anxiously, she weighed the moral hazard, burning or damaging the environment. With is bad enough, but better than letting criminals snatch her dogs or compromise life-saving meds. Setting her jaw, she gave Orion and Titan the command to state put. She then crawled along the perimeter of crates, scanning for something flammable. She found a decaying wooden pallet stacked with old chemical containers. Hazard labels, long faded, crouching, she examined the residue inside. Acrid smells suggested they were old lubricants or oils. The perfect accelerant. A burst of chatter from the men near her trailer sent a jolt of fear through her. Earhawk, we got. Partial reading on a side vent. Could be her climbing around above. Or maybe it's just the dogs. Raven's voice barked back. Check it out. You stay on that reefer. If she tries to break back in, I want her. Cornered. Time was slipping away. Veronica yanked a cloth rag from one container, dousing it in leftover grease. She positioned it near a cluster of broken boards and cardboard scraps. Her plan: spark a small blaze that would produce thick, alarming smoke. The men would see it as a major threat. Hopefully, panic and scramble to extinguish it, or retreat carefully. She retrieved her lighter, an old relic from her service days. She forced her trembling hand steady, ignited the rag, and wedged it beneath the boards. A curl of black smoke rose at once, pungent. Enough to sting her eyes, she hustled back behind the crates where Orion and Titan waited, the dogs blinking at the sudden smell of burning oil. It's okay, boys, she whispered, giving them each a calming pat. We cause a distraction, then we make our move within seconds. The small fire crackled, producing dark, noxious smoke that wafted through the chamber. Alarm shouts erupted from near the reefer trailer. Flashlights whipped around, searching for the source of flames. One man yelped, "Fire! Get water or something! If this place goes up, we're done." Another lunged for a nearby extinguisher cabinet, cursing. When he found it empty, Ravenhawk's furious roar echoed. "Find the handler. She did this. You contain that blaze." A grim smile tugged at Veronica's lips as panic spread among them, with the men distracted. She had her opening pressing her back against the crates. She signaled Orion and Titan to follow her around the far side of the chamber. Her pulse hammered, hoping this gambit wouldn't backfire and trap them, all in a burning mine. But if it worked, she might just save the cargo and reclaim her truck. Thick, acrid smoke quickly filled the chamber, billowing across the floor in swirling clouds. The Desert Reapers scattered, some sprinting for water sources or old fire extinguishers, others fanning out in search of Veronica. Ravenhawk barked commands, but the rising panic swallowed his words. Veronica inned closer to her truck, crouched low to avoid the densest pockets of smoke. Orion and Titan followed, their noses twitching with discomfort. Yet they remained steadfast. She knew prolonged exposure here was dangerous, but so was letting Hawk's crew maintain control of the area nearing the trailer's side. She double-checked the reefer status. The faint mechanical whir persisted, still intact. Relief surged through her. She placed a hand on the battered metal, ignoring the bullet dents that peppered the surface by some miracle. The cooling lines had not been severed yet. She glanced around, noticing two of Hawk's men struggling with an old fire hose that refused to unroll properly. Another was hacking and coughing by the collapsed gate, trying to suck in fresh air. One more adversary stood directly between Veronica and the truck's front. A wiry figure armed with a shotgun. He wore a tattered Reaper's vest, scanning the smoky gloom for any sign of movement. She realized she couldn't simply slip into the cab without dealing with him. First, he'd see her if she attempted it. Gritting her teeth, she motioned for Orion and Titan to flank left. She crept right, pistol raised, one hand on the rig for balance. She edged around the corner. The man coughed violently, propping the shotgun against his chest. Smoke blurred the area, making it hard to aim, but she guessed he was no more than 10 feet away. A single well-placed shot could end his threat. Yet the angle was tricky. Missing could alert others or ricochet into the reefer. She braced her pistol in a two-handed grip, aiming for the silhouette before she could squeeze the trigger. Orion surged out of the smoke on the man's blind side. A growl erupted from the dog's throat as he lunged, clamping onto the shotgun barrel and forcing it down. Surprised, the Reaper stumbled reflexively, pulling the trigger. The blast reverberated, sending pellets into the concrete floor. Inches from Titan. Veronica's heart lurched, but Titan sprang away. Unharmed, the man shrieked in alarm as Orion's weight bore down on him. Titan jumped into assist muzzle, aimed at the attacker's wrist, disarming him with a savage twist. Veronica leapt forward, pistol trained, ensuring no other threats. Lurk behind the swirling haze. The Reaper crumpled to his knees, pinned by Orion's powerful jaws. Titan blocked his escape route, teeth bared, maintaining cover. She growled, "Move an inch, and they finish you." The man's eyes bulged with terror, the shotgun clattering away, satisfied. He was neutralized. She signaled Orion and Titan to stand by. They released him and took protective stances, preventing any attempt to retrieve the weapon. The Reaper coughed uncontrollably, eyes watering from smoke, too disoriented to resist. Veronica grabbed his collar, dragging him away from the truck's path. Smoke stung her own lungs, but she refused to abandon the reefer from deeper in the chamber. She heard fresh yelling, possibly Raven's voice. She sensed the tide of the fight shifting as men scrambled to extinguish the growing flames. If she was going to make a break for it, now was her chance. "Go," she rashed to the dogs, aiming for the driver's cab. Arion and Titan bounded ahead, clearing the route while she scooped up the discarded shotgun, ejecting its shells. A single twist pitched it into the darkness, useless now, wrenching open the truck's cab door. Veronica immediately checked the dash. The instrument panel flickered erratically, no doubt from bullet impacts and the punishing drive through the ravine, but the engine responded with a groan when she turned the key. A rush of triumph flooded her. Her battered rig was still alive. Titan leapt into the passenger seat, panting hard, while Orion followed muzzle streak with soot. The swirling smoke outside was thickening, giving them meager concealment. If any Reaper tried to shoot from a distance, she revved the engine, ignoring the squeal of protest from the axles. One of the front tires was flat, and she had to coax the rig to move slowly, painfully. The truck rolled forward. Sparks scraped beneath the chassis. Where metal had torn, she clenched the wheel, half blind from the smoke. The only reliable reference was the massive support column she'd parked near earlier. If she looped around it, maybe she could inch toward the collapsed gate that led outside. A figure emerged from the haze, Paul imposing with a submachine gun cradled in a practiced stance. Ravenhawk, even from behind the cracked windshield. Veronica recognized his rigid poise. He raised the weapon, aiming directly at her. Her heart thundered a single burst, could riddle the cab with bullets, no matter how reinforced. She slammed the horn, hoping to disrupt his aim. With the jarring noise, the bee, sensing her alarm, barked furiously, teeth flashing at the glass. Raven hesitated for a split second, perhaps unwilling to destroy the dogs he so coveted. That hesitation gave Veronica just enough time to yank the wheel. Left ramming the truck into a stack of crates between them. Wood exploded in a splintered mess, half collapsing in front of Hawk. The submachine gun spat a few rounds in retaliation, pinging off the hood, but the angle saved them from a direct barrage. Out of my way. Veronica roared, as though Hawk could hear her through the chaos. She stomped the accélère. Ator as best she could on a flat tire, the rig lurched, pushing through debris. She glimpsed Hawk, diving aside, rage twisting his features. The swirling black smoke made it impossible to see if any of his men were behind him, but she guessed more were closing in. A flash of bright orange in the corner of her vision signaled the fire. Intensifying flames danced along. The far wall, devouring old board shouts, echoed some men yelling about an imminent collapse. Her plan had worked too well. If the fire wasn't contained, the entire mine might soon become a furnace. But she couldn't stay. She needed to get outside before the Reapers closed off. Her escape steering around scattered debris, she spied the battered metal gate. Her heart sank. Part of the entrance had been further damaged by gunfire. Twisted inward, could the rig squeeze through? Only one way to find out. She pressed the pedal, ignoring the clang of metal on metal and the thunder of collapsing crates around her. Smoke seeped into the cab, despite the windows being mostly shut. Orion coughed, eyes watering, but remained poised, as if ready to leap out. If the truck died again, clang. The truck's front corner struck a bent gate post. Veronica cursed, reversing a few feet, then angled forward. Again sparks flew, metal shrieked, but the gate finally gave way, clearing enough space for her to emerge onto the dusty plateau. With a final burst of power, the truck broke free of the M's entrance. Fresh night air washed over Veronica as the rig emerged from the suffocating mine. Orion and Titan immediately perked up, nostrils flaring as they sucked in oxygen. Her own lungs burned from inhaling smoke, her eyes stinging, but there was no time to savor survival. The aid plateau sprawled ahead, illuminated by pale moonlight and the sporadic flicker of fires behind them. Somewhere beyond these rocky slopes, law enforcement should have been converging, but she saw no sign of red and blue lights. She prayed Sergeant Delgado hadn't been ambushed or diverted. A thunderous noise behind them made her jolt. Part of the mine entrance collapsing in a shower of sparks and rock. She glimpsed a figure, maybe Ravenhawk, scrambling clear just in time, no question. He had still tried to chase her. She pressed the west, urging the crippled truck to pick up speed. The engine rattled, the trailer swayed, but they gained momentum across the plateau. Not far in the distance, she spotted silhouettes of parked bikes and a couple of off-road vehicles, likely the same group that had swarmed her earlier. But these vehicles were mostly abandoned, their riders presumably inside the mine or busy dealing with the chaos that might be a stroke of luck if she could slip past them. There was a narrow access road that snaked down to the desert floor. She recalled glimpsing it earlier. From the canyon rim, pushing the truck onward, she felt the steering wheel fight her with each rotation. The front left rim ground against the gravel, sparks popping like fireworks. She had maybe a few miles left before the axle gave out entirely. Orion barked suddenly, and in the side mirror, she saw a pair of headlights burst from the mine's collapsed gate, and off-road truck roared after them. Engine howling. The driver's silhouette wore a helmet, but the passenger brandished a rifle out the window, so Hawk had managed to keep at least one vehicle operational bullets whined overhead, forcing Varanmon to duck. Titan growled at the open passenger window, keenly aware of the threat. She veered the rig, left scanning for cover. The plateau offered little, just rock outcrops and scrub. The best she could do was zigzag enough to spoil their aim, but each turn RIS flipping the trailer, she grit her teeth, cursing the lost tire. If the truck still had all four wheels up front, she might outrun them. A series of muzzle flashes lit the plateau, round, slammed into the trailer, clanging off the reinforced plating. The reefer unit beeped in protest, an alarm indicating rising internal temperature. Fear stabbed through her. They must have nicked something critical if the refrigeration failed completely. All the medication she'd fought so hard to protect would be ruined. A rocket flare of red and blue lights on the horizon caught her eye. A flicker that might be emergency vehicles. Relief battled with paranoia. Could that be Delgado? At last, the off-road truck behind her weaved in response clearly. Spotting the same lights, Veronica seized the chance. She aimed for a rocky slope that led down to a broader dirt road. Below, the angle was brutal, but it was her best shot at closing the distance to law enforcement. "Hold on, boys," she gasped, gripping the wheel with both hands. Orion and Titan braced themselves, claws digging into the seat. The rig plunged down the slope, jolting violently. Gravel and erupted in a thick cloud behind them, momentarily blinding the pursuing truck. She heard a horrific scraping noise as the trailer's undercarriage ground on rock, but she refused to slow. The distant emergency lights grew brighter. Her one shot at salvation in her mirror, she saw the off-road truck skid sideways, struggling to maintain control. With any luck, they'd spin out or lose sight of her. In the dust, she pressed the accelerator to the floor, ignoring the trucks. Wails of mechanical agony, this run would decide everything. The fate of the children's medications, the survival of her dogs, and the final stand against Ravenhawk's lethal ambitions. In the end, the blazing mind escape and the heart-stopping highway pursuit transform into a testament of loyalty, resourcefulness, and hope. Against all odds, Veronica protects her precious cargo and her beloved K9 partners by using courage honed on distant battlefields. Orion and Titan demonstrate why they remain some of the finest military-trained dogs, thwarting the Desert Reapers' plan to profit from stolen medication and compromised K9s. Children awaiting life-saving treatments finally receive what they need, thanks to a small team's unwavering resolve from a personal perspective. This story shows us that even when the road seems impossible, unity, skill, and devotion can carry us through the darkest tunnels. We'd love to know what you think. Leave a comment to share your favorite moment or any insight you've gained from Veronica's journey. Let's keep the conversation going, and if you enjoyed this tale, Remember to hit subscribe for more adventures that highlight the best of human and canine spirit.